Good evening. I would like to call to order the November 19, 2019 Little Rock City Board of Directors meeting. We would like to welcome those that are in attendance as well as those that are watching at home and streaming online. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Director Hendricks, Director Richardson, Director Webb, Director Peck, Director Hines, Director Wright, Director Compuris, Director Fortson, Director Adcock, Vice Mayor Wyrick, Mayor Scott.
Present. We'll now, actually, Tom, if you wouldn't mind doing the invocation for us today.
Okay. We come together with different ideas, and we're not all in agreement because we've been granted choice. And choice means we use our backgrounds and our experiences to help develop what we think is the best way to proceed. As a government, we have to listen to those with other backgrounds and other experiences and other choices, not so that we all agree, but so that we all know we were heard in the process. Keep that sense of cooperation together tonight. Amen.
Amen, Tom. Let's please stand for pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now have Team USA that will draw the names of the winners from their most recent raffle for the NUSA drawing. Let's give them a round of applause.
Good. Cheer. Our cheerleader's not here. Anybody know the cheer? Go Noosa! All right. Good evening, Mayor.
Good evening.
City Manager Bruce Moore, Mayor Scott. Please forgive me for not using your name.
Oh.
And all of Team Noosa, Vice Mayor Wyrick, Director Adcock, and our other members back here. If you're a NUSA member, would you please stand up? Technically, we are all NUSA members, but this is the team that worked hard to bring the conference here for 2020. And that's just about a third of them. While we're here tonight, not only to do the raffle, we're here to ask for more volunteers to come in and help make NUSA 2020 in the city of Little Rock a success. So please don't be shy. If I have the time, I would just like to read 2 or 3 paragraphs to kind of tell the public about the city of Little Rock and how excited we are to welcome NUSA to the third time, the 45th annual NUSA conference, which will be held here in Little Rock, May 20th through the 23rd of 2020. The theme is Neighbors, the fabric of our communities. In addition to 8 exciting tracks focused on everything from public safety to leadership development, from beautification to multicultural communities, there will be a conference designed specially for youth aged 13 to 18. Hosting NUSA in 1996 was a game changer for Little Rock. It strengthened our neighbors. People from all over the city came together to work on NUSA in 1996. Friendships were formed, which continue to this day. Many of those people worked on NUSA 2010 and have been working since 2018 to prepare for NUSA 2020 in Little Rock. In addition to attending the wonderful sessions and neighborhood tours planned for us, when you come to Little Rock, when you come to the conference, I hope you will explore the many attractions that our city offers. The Little Rock Marriott will be the host hotel, and it is connected to the State House Convention Center. All of our sessions and most of the events will be at these 2 facilities. Within walking distance are dozens of restaurants offering a wide variety of foods for you to enjoy. The Clinton Presidential Center and Little Rock Central High National Historic Site are two of the top destinations for the city visitors and residents alike. Thank you very much. And just for our neighbors who may not know, and some of our leaders that may not know, we have several committees that we would like to invite you to participate in. One of them is the Volunteer Committee, which I am chairperson. I need 200 volunteers. So if you know people that's bored, please call me, 501-766-3317. Also, we have a workshop committee. Right now, we are pumped for 61 workshops. We have exhibits and table talk, social events, extra events, meals and decoration, youth, neighborhood tours, and others. We also have mailing and social media. So if you're one of those people that like to do mailing, please do that. And since we don't have our cheerleader here today, we have our social events chairperson, Ms. Logan. If you don't mind, would you come up and just briefly share with the board and the city what you got prepared for us?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dolores Logan, and I'm the chair for the fantastic 70s extravaganza that will be on Friday, May the 22nd at 7 p.m. to 10. The Integrity Band will be playing the 70s Motown performance of three guys. The name is Clay Todd and two others, and six other band players. Also, on the ones and twos, we will have DJ Tim, known as Tim Harris, and then we will have heavy hors d'oeuvres that night. And we want you to come out because it's going to be a fantastic night. And come out in your 70s. The theme is Fantastic 70s Extravaganza.
All right, all right. So all of you all that like to hold on to your old clothes, especially your party attire, pull it out of the mothballs.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're not going to hold you up any longer. We're going to go ahead on and pull for our prizes, and we have Miss Erica Talbert, who's going to assist us from Ward 7. Is that correct? Okay. If you would, go ahead. Okay, I have two here, so I will use those. We have a Mr. Look like Tim Noble. I won't call your phone number out, but I will put a number on the back so we'll know you're the number one winner. Number 2 is Sherry Lane. Number 3, Reba Taylor Hill. Make sure y'all find my name in there. Mr. Goulet. Robert Goulet, we know him as Sedalia. Latoya Cobb. Tronda Logan. That's real small. I can't wear your glasses. Gwen Ziegler. That's a friend of mine. Sandy Annis, or Annis. We have 12 prizes that we're giving away. Rick Campbell. That's number 11 in your hand. Marty Collin. Need one more. Don Williams. That's it. And Kylie Chisholm. Now, just so you know, some of the wonderful prizes we have are a 55-inch smart, 50-inch smart TV. We have dinner with city manager. We have a 3-night stay at Branson, Missouri. We have a Pecan Lake Neighborhood Association gift baskets that's valued at $150. We have Dilla gift card. We have David's Burger, Chick-fil-A, and several others. And we thank you all for your support, and thank you, Mayor and the board, for your allowing us to stand before you this evening.
Thank you for all that you guys are doing as well. We have one modification for tonight's agenda concerning the annual memorandum of agreement with Pulaski County for the operation of the Pulaski County Regional Detention Facility. Is there a motion? There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the consent agenda as well as item M1. Director Adcock.
Yes, I would like some more information on M1 before we put it on consent, please.
Yes, ma'am. I can give you the information of M1 is what we previously discussed in regards to the jail contract. I think we all understand at one point in time it was set to increase from the normal 1.8, 1.9 million to almost double that, and we were able to work out our agreement to only instead of experiencing a 100% fold increase, it only increased by $500,000.
And is this just for this year only?
Yes, ma'am, for the 2020 year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Adcock. Director Richardson.
Yes, Mayor, just to dovetail Jones' point, is there some way we can assess or deduct the number of nonviolent prisoners or inmates we have over at the Pulaski County Jail? Because I think there's a significant amount of nonviolent people that we're housing there, which certainly increases the number of people that's in there. I know we have a number of people there for simple things like failure to pay child support, which is idiotic to me. So how can you pay child support if you're incarcerated? So there's some way we can deduct, Bruce, the number of people that we have housing there that are there for nonviolent offenses.
Director Richardson, as you are aware, this contract is agreement not only with us but the other counties within other cities within Pulaski County, and so this was the agreed upon terms for the 2020 year. However, because there are a lot of uncertain scenarios for 2021 going forward, we have secured that an audit will take place in the year 2020, so we can have an accurate number of what it should be for our reflective budgets for 2021 going forward. And so what we can do is enlist that part of the process within the auditing function.
Thank you, sir. And there's certainly a possibility that can increase for 2021, correct?
It is a definite possibility.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the consent agenda as well as item M1.
The consent agenda consists of a resolution to set December 3rd, 2019 as the date of public hearing to consider the abandonment of an undeveloped, unnamed right-of-way located north of Canis Road, east of Embassy Suites Drive in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes. A resolution to set December 3rd, 2019 as the date of public hearing on a request for the right-of-way and easement abandonment for an undeveloped 50-foot scenic boulevard right-of-way located within the property at 55 Scenic Boulevard, and for the purposes. A resolution to create the temporary entertainment district River Market Extension for Saturday, November 30th, 2019, and for the purposes. A resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with D&J Red Iron and Aggregates Ltd. in the amount not to exceed $51,243,085 for the 22nd Street Drainage Improvement Project and for other purposes, funding from the 3/8 cent capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizing the use of eminent domain on the Mapleville Pike and Gamble Road improvement projects and for other purposes, funding from the 3/8 cent capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Burkhalter Technologies Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $238,973.40 for the Bell Mead Drive reconstruction project and for the purposes, funding from the 3/8 cent capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Positive Results Lawn Service Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $54,548.40 for the Daily Drive Improvement Project and for the purposes, funding from the 3/8 cent capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into a contract with Oakley Fertilizer Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $300,000 for the purchase of rock salt in bulk for the Public Works Department Operations Division and for other purposes. A resolution authorizes the city manager to enter into an annual contract with a Stitch of Class in the approximate amount of $70,000 for the purchase of employee uniforms for the Public Works Department and for the purposes. A resolution expressed support for the continuation of the retail compensation policy for residential solar customers to transmit this support to the Arkansas Public Service Commission as it considers docket number 16-027-R and for the purposes. A resolution to approve authorizing 1 operator permit and 75 taxi cab permits for Greater Little Rock Transportation Service LLC and the approval of 1 operator permit and 5 taxi cab permits for Ken's Cab LLC for the period of January 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020, and for the purposes, a resolution to require the 2019 audit be performed in accordance with the guidelines and formats prescribed by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, and the United States Government Accountability Office, and for the purposes, a resolution to appropriate up to $2,800,000 from the city's 3/8 cent capital improvement, 3/8 cent capital sales and compensating use tax proceeds to the Central Arkansas Technology Park Authority, and for the purposes, a resolution authorized the mayor and city clerk to enter into a memorandum of agreement with Pulaski County, Arkansas, concerning the operation of the Pulaski County Regional Detention Facility, and for the purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
Thank you, Ally. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, would you please read the grouped items for the first time, 14 through 22?
An ordinance to amend ordinance number 16,807 of June the 20th, 1995, revoking a portion of the planned zoning district titled Brody Creek Conceptual Long Form PRD, reclassifying property located within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, an ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, an ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, an ordinance to amend the land use plan in the Interstate 430 Planning District northeast of Aldersgate Road and West 20th Street from residential low density to residential medium density, and for the purposes, an ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, amending the official zoning map of the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for the purposes, an ordinance to fix and impose the aggregate amount of fees and charges to be paid to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by Energy Corporation and the method of payment thereof, to amend Section 9 of Little Rock, Arkansas, ordinance number 11,683 of December 6, 1965, and for the purposes, an ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas, ordinance number 11,366 of March the 4th, 1963, as amended, to provide for levying a franchise fee to be paid by Centerpoint Energy Arkla, to provide for the payment thereof, and for the purposes, an ordinance to levy franchise fees to be paid by carriers providing local access telephone services to provide for the payment thereof and for the purposes, an ordinance to fix and impose the amount of fees and charges to be paid to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by all companies that provide interstate or intrastate long-distance telecommunication services and all business incidental to or connected with the conducting of such telephone business in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, to amend Section 3 of Little Rock, Arkansas, ordinance number 15,706 of July 5th, 1989, and for the purposes first reading.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Second reading.
An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas, ordinance number 16,807, revoking a portion of the planned zoning district titled Brody Creek Conceptual Longform PRD, reclassifying property located within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to amend the land use plan in the Interstate 430 Planning District northeast of Aldersgate Road and West 20th Street from residential low density to residential medium density. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to fix and impose the aggregate amount of fees and charges to be paid to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by Energy Corporation with the method of payment thereof to amend Section 9 of Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance 11,683. An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance number 11,366 as amended to provide for levying a franchise fee to be paid by CenterPoint Energy Arcla to provide for the payment thereof. An ordinance to levy franchise fees to be paid by all carriers providing local access telephone services to provide for the payment thereof. An ordinance to fix and impose the amount of fees and charges to be paid to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by all companies that provide interstate or intrastate long-distance telecommunication services and all business incidental to or connected with the conducting of such telephone business in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, to amend Section 3 of Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance number 15,706, second reading.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Third reading.
An ordinance to amend ordinance number 16,807, revoking a portion of the planned zoning district titled Brody Creek Conceptual Longform PRD, reclassifying property located within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to reclassify property located within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to amend the land use plan in the Interstate 430 Planning District northeast of Aldersgate Road and West 20th Street from residential low density to residential medium density. An ordinance to reclassify property located within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas. An ordinance to fix and impose the aggregate amount of fees and charges to be paid to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by Energy Corporation and the method of payment thereof to amend Section 9 of Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance number 11,683. An ordinance to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance number 11,366 is amended to provide for levying a franchise fee to be paid by CenterPoint Energy Arcla to provide for the payment thereof. An ordinance to levy franchise fees to be paid by all carriers providing local access telephone services to provide for the payment thereof. An ordinance to fix and impose the amount of fees and charges to be paid to the city of Little Rock, Arkansas by all companies that provide interstate or intrastate long-distance telecommunication services and all business incidental to or connected with the conducting of such telephone business in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, to amend Section 3 of Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance number 15,706, third and final reading.
We've now had three readings. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Before we move on to separate items 23 and 24, I want to first ask Mr. Leahy to come up and apologize to you, Mr. Leahy. I read your agenda card wrong. I thought it said 23 that you wanted to speak for in regards to the 23rd resolution, and I misread that, so I do apologize, but still wanted to give you the opportunity to visit. But I wanted to publicly apologize to you.
If that's the only mistake you made today, you're doing good, Mayor. And I was mistaken on what item it was, so kindly disregard my request to speak on it. I'm not prepared to speak on that. I thought there was a different item on the agenda, but I'm sorry I made that mistake, but I accept your apology.
Thank you so much. Mr. Leahy, Director Adcock is asking, what item did you want to speak on?
Well, I understood we was going to have a budget discussion, and that's what I was.
Yes, And I originally thought, I thought you wrote 23, but I'm looking at it says 13, so we had bypassed, we had already approved the 13th. That's why I was apologizing. But you can speak on the 23rd if you want to start now. But if you'll just give me 1 second, and 24, and so we'll allow you to speak on 24 when we get to it. So I'll bring you right
Okay.
back up. You'll just go to the front row so you don't have to go all the way to the back. All right. The next two items, we shared the last meeting, I just kind of want to lay the groundwork. We've been going over our budgeting process since about September. And really getting the board of directors as well as the citizens of Little Rock prepared for the 2020 budget. So far, we've had 3 community meetings where we've shared the budgeting process, helping individuals to understand the budgeting process and having greater education on it. And so we've shared that with the public. We've also had a number of sessions since about September here with the city board members, and we have taken heed to a lot of the suggestions that you wanted to see included in the budget, and those are reflected in the budget. I won't reiterate that at this point in time. But we wanted to offer the opportunity again to open the floor for questions in regards to our budget, and that's item number 24. Before we get to item number 24, we also will discuss item number 23, which is the increase of, not the increase, to establish a glass recycling fee of $3.39. The board has wanted that to be, has asked the Public Works Department to do a study, as well as the RFP process. There was only one company that submitted on a proposal for the request for proposal, and that was Ace Glass, and the dollar amount was $3.39, which would go in addition to the amount that this board has already previously approved for solid waste and yard waste. And so that's what's before you for item number 23. Again, both of these items will not be voted on today. They'll be voted on November the 26th. But we wanted, again, understanding that November 26th is a holiday week, we want to make sure we try to, as best as possible, have an expedited meeting to be respectful of families. And so we would love to have as many questions addressed today so we could pass this budget on November the 26th. That's the goal. And we'll entertain. Before we get to those questions, I also wanted to allow the public to speak so far today for item number, Troy wants to visit on item number 24, so we have 3 cards to discuss item number 24. Troy, Mr. Leahy.
Well, my opposition to that, well, wait a minute, I'm Troy Leahy, and good afternoon, good evening, Mayor and Board of Directors and the city staff. I'm opposed to switching a lot of this money around to what it doesn't go for. For the instance, about $2 million, I understand, has been taken out of the street fund and put over into the bus fund. I don't have anything against the buses, although they take up a whole lot of room on the city streets, but I know that there's an awful lot of people that are bad upset about losing $2 million out of the street fund when there's potholes and everything like that on the streets, water standing on the streets. Every time it comes a nice shower and wintertime coming on, that's going to be a glazed eye situation. And whenever we ask to extend this 3/8 cents sales tax for the city streets, how are we going to overcome all the feeling in the neighborhood about, well, they took that money and done something else with it, they didn't spend it on the streets. And I may have a little trouble supporting it this time. I supported it last time because I thought it'd be a good thing, but this time I may have to do some real soul searching and look pretty deep to be sure that it'd be worthwhile if they get all that money and take it away and do something else with it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Leahy. Miss Linda Bell. And Miss Linda, I know you'll discuss item number 23. How are you doing today?
Very good, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, and to the board. I am concerned about the additional fee. Can you hear me? Okay. I am concerned about the additional fee
Miss Linda, if you could pull the microphone down just a tad
for
bit.
glass recycling. I was here at the meeting where most of the board voted for an additional fee, $7, for garbage pickup. And now we're asked for another $3 for glass recycling, whereas we have other options for glass recycling. We can take our glass to Edwards and other places. And most people, reuse their glass if it's canning jars. So there isn't a real problem with that. We do have recycling, which now has been greatly reduced. Our fee for that has not been reduced. So those of us that are seniors and are on fixed income are now expected to pay an additional $7 for our garbage fee, which I have one sack a month, small sack a month, and I'm paying as much as people that have a full can every single week. I think it's onerous on those of us who are seniors. I think asking for an additional $3 fee is unacceptable, and I would like for those of you that voted for that $7 to consider that seniors have to pay for medicine and food, and we don't get a $10 raise to cover the garbage and glass fee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bell. Mr. Dan Lusk.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Board of Directors. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. What I want to talk about is I want to object to the transfer of funds from the street funds to the Rock Region Metro system. And the reason that this is very important to me is because I live in the Arbors subdivision in Chenal. There's 79 residents in the Arbors. Across the street from us is the Oaks. There's 120 residents in the Oaks. And also to the south of us is the Chenal Country Club. All of these neighborhoods and the Chenal Country Club are fed off of Chenal Club Boulevard. Chenal Club Boulevard is fed off of Chenal Parkway. Chenal Parkway was designed some 25 plus years ago. And if I'm not mistaken, White Daters, a very renowned engineering firm here in Little Rock, laid all of it out. And I've had conversations with people from White Daters, and they indicated to me that when they designed the parkway, it was designed for a maximum speed limit of 45 miles an hour. At the intersection of Chenal Club and Chenal Parkway, there is a curve in the road, and there is a blind spot that has been created. So if you have traffic that's exceeding the speed limit, the sight distances are not adequate for that intersection. And Director Hines has been trying to help us in obtaining a traffic signal for that intersection, and he was nice enough to get the LRPD to come out and run radar at that intersection. And one of the things that I found interesting that was noted after they did their radar was that 85% of the traffic that they were clocking on the parkway was exceeding the speed limit. 85%. That's almost every vehicle on the road is speeding down that parkway. I personally have seen vehicles I estimate to be doing at least 75 miles an hour. In the mornings, it's like the Indianapolis Speedway, literally. People are on their way to work. They're in a hurry. They start at the top of the hill. By the time they get to that intersection, they're doing it 65, 70, 75 miles an hour. And it's a very, very dangerous intersection. It has been for years, and it still is. And I'm the president of the Arbors Property Owners Association. I've been on the board 4 years. I've served for the last 2 years as president. I can tell you at every meeting that we have, this subject comes up. We need a traffic signal. If you talk to the people at Chenal Country Club, they will tell you for the last 20 years that this has been a discussion. We need a traffic signal at that intersection. Chenal Parkway, at this point in its lifespan, should not have an intersection that's not signalized. Okay? It's just dangerous. So we have been working in the last few years with Director Hines to get a signal. One of the things they tell us is that we don't meet warrants for volume. That's incorrect. They're not counting right turnout traffic at that intersection. If they did, we meet the warrants. We have a traffic engineer, we have an engineer, civil engineer that will tell you the same thing. Number two, we meet the warrants for a life safety issue. Okay? It's a life safety issue. There has been a fatality at this intersection. There's been a near fatality. There have been numerous accidents. We have requested the accident reports from LRPD. We have not been successful in getting those, but I have somebody working on that right now. But there have been tons and tons of accidents. So what I'm saying is that, when I fill up my car with gas, part of that goes to the state turnback fund for road improvements and safety and so forth. And the city has a street fund. I know of many major intersections right now that need signals in the city of Little Rock. We have street repairs that need to be done. And by taking the money from the street fund and shifting it to Rock Region Metro, these projects aren't getting funded. And that is just not right. And so I would ask Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, the board, I would ask y'all to please, please reconsider taking this money out of the street fund and the turnback fund and shifting it to Rock Region Metro. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lusk. Mr. Moore, if you would just kind of give a brief synopsis.
Sure, Mayor, members of the board. As we've talked about numerous times, using our street fund to fund public transit is a legal use of the dollars. As you know, the city has many infrastructure needs, capital needs. As you also know, the last 10 years we've done 3 different phases of bond and sales tax projects, and we go to the community. We work with all of you all to determine those needs. And again, we're using sales and bond proceeds. We have not said no. I think that John and his staff, along with Director Hines, we've developed a plan on some short-term issues in order to address the speeding. As Mr. Luck said, we've had our LRPD out there. We've done some other things to the intersection. So it's just a matter of prioritizing. And typically a traffic signal, depending on what all the different components, but it usually ranges between 175,000, 200 to 25,000. So it's not an issue of not having the dollars. And there is some disagreement about, the warrants, and I think some of their individuals feel like they meet warrants. Our numbers don't show that yet. So it's not, again, a no. It's been more of we're trying to prioritize things along the parkway. That's something Director Hines has been very clear about. And as we move forward and this moves up the priority list, we'll be able to address it. So, again, there's never been a clear no. It's just as we've gone through the last 10 years of priorities in each ward, we've addressed some of the other priorities at this point, but we have been able to do traffic signals at intersections that are warranted, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Director Richardson.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to piggyback on Ms. Bell's point. I apologize for missing last week's meeting. I will miss next Tuesday's meeting. I'll be out of town, but I think Ms. Bell made a relevant point with respect to the cost and the impact it's going to have on a number of our residents. And as a director of a ward that has a disproportionate number of unemployed, underemployed constituents, I think it's going to have a real negative impact on their ability to absorb this cost. And another point I wanted to make clear, I caught the end of the board meeting when I got home last week, and I kept hearing references to jobs it's going to create. Jobs it's going to create. That's not necessarily meaning or guaranteeing that those jobs are going to go to City of Little Rock residents. So this selling point about us, this creating more jobs to me is kind of it's a misnomer. Because there's no guarantee that those jobs are going to be filled by City of Little Rock residents. We can't even mandate the city employees live in the City of Little Rock. So there's no way they're going to be able to guarantee us that those new employees are going to be employed with Citizen Little Rock employees. And I find it problematic on a number of fronts because I think a lot of times we always celebrate and talk about all these new jobs that are coming to Little Rock. And to me, the operative word is to Little Rock rather than for Little Rock. So I think that's really, really a selling point that I think we need to really, really look at and consider when we're talking about selling this particular item. And I agree with Ms. Bell, this is going to have a deleterious effect on those people. While 339 may not mean a lot to a lot of us in this room, a number of my constituents is going to have a significant impact on their ability to provide their basic needs and services. So I wanted to make sure I made that point, Mayor, because I won't be here next Tuesday when we vote on this and talk about this, but I have some real grave concerns about this issue and the impact it's going to have on a number of my constituents, and the selling point that it's going to bring. It's going to create jobs, and it's not going to create. They can't mandate. We can't mandate. They can't guarantee that these jobs are going to be filled by City of Little Rock residents. And I wanted to make sure we heard that and made that clear, because I won't be here next Tuesday. So, Mayor, thank you for letting me go back and piggyback on Ms. Bell's point. I think she made a wonderful point about the financial impact it's going to have on a number of our people in the city.
Director Compuris.
May I address Bruce? Yes. Bruce or John, is there any way, while we're looking at Chenal, that we do any traffic mitigating steps such as speed bumps or flashing lights or something else to help do this until we figure this problem out? I mean, it seems like we're in a situation where either we're talking about doing the traffic light or nothing until we get the warrant figured out. And there has to be something in between that we can start doing. And that may prove that how we can take care of this problem if we start doing something less than that. But, John, can you address that?
Certainly, or at least I can try. Director compares Chenal Parkway is a principal arterial, and speed humps are not appropriate on it. So that's.
I just was using
sure.
something to do.
At this point, mitigating the speed that's occurring, enforcement is really the best alternative for that. And physically changing the road is going to be extremely expensive and may not necessarily be effective. With the principal arterial, there's certain criteria that we have to follow when we have roads of that nature. So it limits what we can do to change that. We are currently designing and going to construct a signal at Chenal and Chenal Valley Loop. Is that just north of this intersection? Right now there is no Chenal Valley Drive. Sorry, that's why I said loop. Yes, sir. We'll be putting in a signal there. Right now there is no signal from I think it's Shenandoah all the way till you get to Rawling. So now we're at least going to have a signal where you are going to be able to have traffic stopped. It's going to create breaks in that traffic or gaps in the traffic where left turn movements will have an opportunity where you don't have a continuous flow of traffic. So that is something that is occurring in the corridor.
Well, as you know from your running and my driving, I drive through Kamek Village.
Yes, sir.
And they've got this nice little cheap sign that says when you're going over 25 miles an hour. And they oftentimes have a policeman sitting in a driveway there.
Yes, sir.
And so basically, I've been trained, as most people going through Kamek Village, that if you don't do what's right, you're going to get a ticket.
Yes, sir.
Now, that is not a $250,000 expense. So if you get one of those little things that say that clocks you going over there, and we start sending a policeman out there on a regular basis, then I bet you that we may not be able to solve the problem right now, but we'll take the first step as we try to figure out a permanent solution.
Certainly. We'll be happy to look at that. And we'll encourage y'all to help us encourage assistance from the police force to do enforcement out there as much as possible, too.
You know, I bet there's two people in here who can help take care of that problem.
Thank you.
On it. Director Hines?
Thanks. Bruce, and I think the issue, and I'm gonna, y'all tell me if I'm wrong, but almost all of our priorities that we've done with signalization have all been funded by our 3/8 cent sales tax for capital improvements. In order to get that signal at Chenal Valley Drive and Chenal Boulevard, we had to reprogram a project to get the funds for that out of that money. And here's what I will tell you that's the overriding concern from my constituents and me, is that we have another intersection that meets warrants, Kirk Road and Raleigh, where we have bad accidents there all the time. In fact, some of the directors said they saw one there this weekend. That one's not funded, correct? We don't have any funding. So my concern is we're sitting here and what I hear is we don't have any funding, and then we're taking money out of the street fund that we used to take out of the general fund. So we have plugged a gap in the general fund because the legislature allows us to send it to Rock Region Metro. But my concern is we've been told all along we don't have funding to do those, and we've had to reprogram it. So my concern is that's $500,000, and then another, and if we could, if Chenal Club, and I will tell you, we did 30 days of straight enforcement on Chenal Boulevard, or Chenal Parkway. I can tell you the residents, Dan and my friend Marty over there, they will tell you that it was a temporary fix, but the speeds are back up. And, you know, I think something like Dean is talking about on that southbound lane, something, at least a flashing signal alerts people, hey, one, there's an intersection, and two, you're speeding would be helpful and probably a lot less expensive than a traffic signal. I know that Deltic has come in and taken out some shrubs to try to help improve sight distance, but in reality, and what's going on is the folks that live there don't see any improvement. So we can hide behind our warrants and what they're doing. We've already had one fatality there. Does it take another fatality there or one at Kirk Road before we do this? And when we transfer another $1 million out to Rock Region Metro, not only is that projects in my ward that aren't getting done, but how many other projects across the city could we be getting done with that money each year? And it's a continued deal. And when we talked and had the budget discussion, the street fund, if I'm not, the surplus in the street fund is going to be declining over the next 5 years, not increasing like it has been. So the concern is if we're transferring that money out and we didn't have any money, then how can we transfer those dollars out to Rock Region Metro? That's what I'm hearing from my constituents. That's what I'm hearing from me. And it's good to hear that Troy Leahy, who lives in Southwest Little Rock, sees the same thing. So it's not just centric to West Little Rock. It's something that people in the city are seeing. So that's my concern. You know, and that's what I'm saying. We've only used the 3/8 cents, and we've given a pass. That's why my concern when we did the budget adjustment is we're transferring money out. There's no belt tightening or how do we become more efficient in public works, even though we're doing it. So I guess the question is what projects aren't going to get done that we're transferring $2 million out a year now? And that's money that used to come out of the general fund. So my other question is that $2 million is being spent elsewhere out of the general fund because it didn't decline. Or may have declined to use, we've robbed Peter to pay Paul in one essence to balance part of the budget. But that's the concerns I see on that issue. And just to set the record straight, we've done almost all those priority capital improvements out of the 3/8 cent sales tax. I don't know how much has come out of the general fund. The other concern, and I expressed this to the mayor and to Bruce, the legislature has already put a target on municipalities in Arkansas on use of these street turnback funds. They've already saw it once to further restrict how we use those funds. Unfortunately, when we've gone from $1 million to now $2 million, we have put a gigantic target out there for the legislature coming in January. And I've already heard from several state legislators that they're going to look at it again and try to further restrict because in their mind, it's like Dan and them said, that should be used. They've given us permission to transfer it over, but $2 million out of $16 million that's in the fund is quite a big percentage to send to transit. And I agree, we've got to have a healthy transit system in this city, but we're robbing Peter to pay Paul in one essence, and it's coming out of our street funds. So that's my concern on that. Thank you.
Director Fortson.
I was going to ask what the annual amount of turnback money is at the present time, Mr. Moore.
Okay, let's see, page 39 of the budget presentation. The state turnback for 2020 is $14,113,000, and then the road tax is $6,110,000. Total revenue to the street fund is $21,339,000.
Is that amount constant from year to year, or does it fluctuate?
This has been steady. As we discussed when we presented the budget about a month ago, the revenue forecast for 2019 was understated. You can see on the state turnback line that what we actually collected in 2018 was about $530,000 more than what we had in the budget for 2019. What we've projected for 2020 is a 1.8% increase over what we expect our 2019 receipts to be of $13,865,000 in that turnback revenue. And several years ago, there was a limit on the amount of transit that could be funded from the street fund. That has been overturned by recent legislatures, and there is not a limit now on the amount of transit funding that can come from the street fund revenues. It is an eligible source.
Sarah, are there any other areas from which street funds are being transferred to be used?
And this is not a transfer. There's no transfer. This is a payment to Rock Region, but it is
Station.
right.
Okay.
But they are street funds. The only transfer from the street fund are either to fund equipment purchases and things for the street fund equipment, and then the overhead allocation for the general fund that covers the cost of like the legal services, the finance. They don't have a finance department. They don't have any of the overhead department, HR, hiring, that kind of thing. And it's a very small percentage.
But there are no other specific allocations?
No.
Thank you.
Director Adcock.
Yes, Sarah, in 2018, didn't we take some money out of the street funds for another purpose? And what was it?
The transfers are actually on page, 41.
Okay.
So they're all street fund related purchases. So in 2018, the street fund vehicle replacement, the LED street light retrofits, then the sidewalk and the right-of-way reentry programs, pavement marking, Buchanan Street improvements, University Street, grant match, a street sweeper, GIS storm transfer, and then the administrative overhead allocation I mentioned is $200,000, and it's actually decreased.
So we took out money for the reentry program.
Those are for the maintaining the right-of-way on the streets and the sidewalks. Those are street projects.
Okay. So we've not taken money out of the street fund for any other
No, the
purposes?
street funds are restricted for streets, roads, drainage, transit. All money has to relate to street projects.
Okay. So last year, where did we get the money for the transit?
Last year's budget, the original adopted budget included $1 million for Rock Region Metro. The budget amendment adopted in June 4th moved $500,000 of what had been used from the general fund. Our contribution to Rock Region Metro is about $10,200,000, I think. I've got that in.
So last year, 500,000 was all that came out.
$1,500,000 in 2019 is coming from the street fund,
Okay.
and then of our increase of about 700 and some thousand in the current year, that amount, $2 million, will be the total coming from the street fund, and coming from the general fund on, let's see, our Side agency funding. Hold on just a minute. Sorry. Outside agencies on page 33. So the total Rock Region Metro funding is $10,195,000, and 8.2 million comes from the general fund, 2 million comes from the street fund.
So last year, we did it 2 million out of the street fund too.
Last year we did $1.5 million. I mean, 2019, $1.5 million. We're doing 2 million in 2020. In 2018, it was $1 million.
So we have a history of taking money out of the street fund for the bus.
Yes.
And how long has that been going on?
Probably 3 years.
Okay. Well, I was surprised when I saw 2 million was going to go to the bus service also.
2 million of that total, yes.
Okay, I know that they have had a big increase in ridership and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So how is the income from that doing? Why do we still have to do 2 million this year if their ridership is so good?
Very little, and the executive director of Rock Region Metro is here, so he may be better equipped to answer some of these questions. But very little of the revenue for transit comes from actual ridership. The majority of that comes either from federal grants or from public funding. Transit is a service provided to some of our citizens that have the greatest need, and the bus fares in no way come close to covering the cost of drivers or operating or maintaining
Where
those
is the
routes.
advertising? Because I noticed lots of advertising being done on the buses.
I'm gonna. May I ask Executive Director Frazier to come up and?
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening. Charles Frazier, Executive Director of Rock Region.
Good. Mr. Frazier, on advertising, how is that on your revenue?
I'm sorry, the last part of the question?
The amount you're getting in from the advertising on the buses.
We've actually increased the advertising this year. The sales have been going up for us, so we're taking in this year about $70,000 more than last year, so close to $370,000 annually.
Okay. And this year, your budget with us is how much more than it was last year?
I think we have the slide up there for the exact amount. About 700,000.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And two things, if you don't mind me adding, just to plant the seed there, because we're talking about the street fund. One of the things that I want to partner with the city on this next year is going after competitive Federal Transit Administration grants. Where there are streets where we have transit, we can apply for competitive grants that will pay for the street, sidewalks, signals, signage. And so that's, I think, an opportunity for us. As I'm listening to this, I think there's an untapped source of funding there. The federal government advertised over $500 million in FTA grants, and Arkansas did not get any of that money this year. So I hope that we can focus on that and maybe find an opportunity there.
Thank you. Director Hines?
Charles, I guess you can answer. So our funding last year was 10.2 million? Or is that this? Okay, so what was 2019? It was less, right?
700,000 less.
700,000. Okay, I know we talked 700,000. There's lots of numbers. Okay. And I will come to Charles's defense. Since he's taken over at Rock Region Metro, we've seen a lot more imagination and things like this. And we did sit down and visit where previously Rock Region has not partnered with the city to help us out in other ways other than taking money to run the bus system. So I appreciate your vision. I know that much, and I'll admit that I was wrong. Several years ago, I said you could double the fee to ride the trolley or make it free, and it wouldn't affect ridership. But evidently, making it free does have an increase in ridership. But you figured out a way to replace the lost revenue, which was declining, with advertising. So I appreciate your vision and forethought on that to kind of make lemonade out of a lemon with what you're dealing with. So I appreciate it. Thanks, Charles.
My pleasure.
Director Richardson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Not to be dismissive of this issue, and you can go sit down, sir.
Thank you.
Mayor, before you took office last November, almost to the day, I expressed my frustration with us not having this same kind of concern and or interest or discussion around the violence in our community. I remember the last time I brought this up, we had a triple homicide. I think we had 5 homicides over one weekend. And last time we had the discussion, it was around First Tee. And I think from Thursday to Sunday or Saturday, in my mind, we've had an unacceptable rate of violent crime in our community. And I don't want it to appear to be that we're unintentionally saying that violence is okay as long as it happens in certain parts of our community. We can draw a box around where the crime is going to happen, where those suspects and or victims live and reside and socialize. And I think it bothers me again that we say public safety is our number one priority, but when these kinds of things happen, it's crickets. We don't say anything about it. And last time we talked about First Tee, for the same amount of time we've been talking about this, and I'm not being dismissive of this issue, but I think the criminal activity in our community is unacceptable. And the places where it's happening, just to go back to Ms. Bell's point, we have an unemployment rate that rivals the unemployment rate during the Great Depression. And we never seem to have a paradigm shift to move our tactics or how we address public safety beyond law enforcement. We never look at job creation, job development, or other ways or proactive ways to address criminal activity. And when I did gang intervention prevention work, one of the things I recognized, Mayor, this was before you got in the office last year, so this doesn't apply to you. And I thank you for your reference to your acknowledgement of this criminal activity that's happened the last 3 or 4 days. But one of the things that I noticed, that gang presence and or crime was strongest where community was weakest. And we can draw a box and look at where it's happening, and it's continually happening. And Mayor, I want to thank you. I think last time, Bruce, you made reference to it and about the importance of it. I think, Mayor, just as recently as Monday or Sunday, I think you made reference to it. But it bothers me somewhat that when we're talking about this, that it seems like we're inadvertently sending the message out that violence is okay, crime is okay, as long as it's contained within this box. And that's really, really troublesome for me, who represent a large portion of that box, and what's happening to the people who live in that box and the opportunities that they don't have. And I think a lot of that helps contribute to the social ills that create the crime that we're seeing. I don't want that message to be communicated from us that it's okay for it to happen in certain places to certain people. I remember last time, Mayor, we had the shooting at the nightclub, and the very next day, the mayor had an emergency press conference. And the mayor said that press conferences don't solve crime. Well, why did we have it? I think when you have those press conferences, you send a message to the community that we're not going to accept, what's acceptable, what's unacceptable. If it didn't solve crime and doesn't solve crime, why did we have an emergency press conference the very next day? Not the next week, not the third week or fourth, the very next day. And prior to that, we had a 2-year-old get murdered, a 3-year-old get murdered, and 2 triple homicides. Not one word. And Mayor, I thank you for making reference to that via social media. I think as a board member, and to my colleagues, it's really, really troubling to me because it's happening to people in my ward. It's happening to people who look like me. And it's very, very troubling that we don't have the same kind of conversation, same kind of interest and or passion about what we're talking about right now. And last year it was First Tee. So, Mayor, I just wanted to just get away from that for a minute and express my frustration with respect to that.
Director Richardson, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Director Wright.
Mayor, may we have Mr. Frazier come back, please?
Yes.
Hello. Hello. You made reference to the grants that the federal government advertises. What do you need from us in order to go after those grants?
So I'm already reaching out and talking to planning and public works. What I really need ultimately is a prioritized list of projects where there are existing bus routes. That's the nexus. If there's an existing bus route and there's a need to improve a sidewalk, a street, we should write a competitive grant and go after FTA grant funding for that. And we'll include in that other amenities like shelters, bike racks, signal prioritization, that type of a thing, so we would be competitive for those.
Okay. So if I analyze the routes in Ward 6 and I see where there are no good sidewalks or covered areas, I can let you know, and we can see if we could write a competitive grant to cover
Absolutely.
those costs.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I'll begin to work on to see if we can't make that happen.
Very good.
And I keep getting good reports about the microtransit.
Yes, it's a successful pilot project. I'm looking forward to rolling it out in other parts of the community once we finish that process.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
Thank you, Director Wright. Charles, you may want to stay for a second.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Warwick.
Thank you. I just want to say that Charles has been a great partner for the residents that are bus riders and for the city of Little Rock. He's very enthusiastic. He's very concerned about how to get people moving, getting to jobs, getting to different things that they need to go to. He's worked out a plan where we have school children riding buses. They have passes where they can go to libraries. They can do different things with the buses. He's worked out a situation how to work with the homeless. So the homeless have passes to get to different places. No, they're not free. They're funded. But he's very energetic, and he's very deep thinking and trying to improve the ridership on the buses. I can remember for years we used to have some of the past executive directors come in here and we go, oh, here we go again. But you brought a wealth of knowledge and a lot of help for the people in the city. But I did want to ask you the question about the $700,000 that is additional this year. Can you describe what that is? I understood it was unfunded federal mandates. That's the reason for the increase.
There's two primary reasons.
Okay.
The first is the unfunded federal mandate, which is our paratransit service. So we must provide paratransit service for persons with disabilities that can't otherwise get to the fixed route network. And that is our link service. It's door-to-door service. And we must remain compliant with that service. We cannot turn anyone away from those trips. And so to remain compliant, we have to address the past few years of growth. And so this is a corrective action that I'm making, and we have to do it now. We need to stay in compliant, otherwise we risk our $6 million of federal grants that we receive every year. So that's by and large the largest portion of that. The second piece is that we are proactively planning for next year's local match funds for our grants that we get, that $6 million. If we can't go get that $6 million, we really shouldn't be in business.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted you to be able to share that with us. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Director Hines.
Yes, Mayor and Bruce, I really would like to have a further discussion offline, because I fully anticipate the legislature clipping our wings on what percentage of our turnback funds are going to be able to be used. I know they've taken the cap off, but when we go from $0 to $2 million in 3 years as a percentage of our turnback funds, I'm just telling you, we're already on the radar for this, and it's coming in January. So we need to be prepared.
Bruce?
And I agree. We can continue the dialogue, but also, when we talk about the street fund, one of the things that we have done and the board supported, when we talk about our fund balance, you really two major projects. You really total about $8 million that are very important to our city. One is the I-30 expansion. Half of that is our match for that project, and then the board just recently this fall endorsed the Pine Cedar Boulevard. So when we talk about the fund balance and the decrease, I want us to also keep in mind that for two major projects that are very important to our city. That's how we paid for those, also out of the street fund. But I agree, Director Hines, we ought to have that dialogue.
Mayor.
Yes, Tom?
Director Hines, I just want to clarify, when you said offline, you're talking about not a part of the budget ordinance right now. You mean it some other time?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Parliamentary. Director Richardson?
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, first, thank you guys for providing passes for the homeless. And this may be a question you can't answer, but can you guesstimate the amount of money that costs us doing that, providing that service, giving free bus passes for homeless? Do we have some kind of figure on the number of homeless people that are utilizing that service?
So just for clarification, the people that are receiving the bus passes are persons who are experiencing homelessness. This is not the chronically homeless, because we wanted to be very careful about who's riding the bus with our school children and our seniors. So these are folks that are engaged in services with case managers who are getting on-the-job training, they're getting life skill training, and they are working their way out of homelessness. And so there's no additional cost for us to run the buses that are already running without this program. So there's no additional cost. And we, through our fare agreement, we actually receive a payment through the Arkansas Homeless Coalition to distribute the passes. So there is no additional cost. If anything, there might be an amount of perceived lost revenue, but the buses are running already.
So there seems to be an implication that there's an application process, some process that you have to go to that assure you will have a case manager to make sure you're liable. I mean, you're eligible for those services. So do we have any guesstimation on those costs, staffing costs? Because I know there's a process, but I know you're not just going around the homeless camp tossing out bus passes.
Correct.
I know there's a process, and you have to use staff. And it may not be your staff. There may be staff from other social agencies to make sure they go through this process that you just explained.
Sure. So we're in the tail end of a year-long pilot program with the Arkansas Homeless Coalition. The Arkansas Homeless Coalition has taken the lead on administering the program. As we wind down the end of this pilot program, the goal is to transfer this to an administered program. And the cost for that is probably going to be less than $100,000 in total. And what that would cover is the cost of the passes themselves, the staff to interview and engage the persons that are receiving the bus passes, printing and staffing an office.
So part of that is paid for by the Homeless Coalition. I want us to understand and know that's not anything you guys are doing unilaterally. It's done in partnership with another entity.
Correct. In fact, for this pilot year, none of those expenses were seen because a volunteer administered the program. So as we move forward, those are the costs that will be passed on, in theory, to the service providers themselves. That hasn't been worked out yet, but that's why part of the reason for the pilot program.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Before we go on, Madam Clerk, would you please read item number 23?
Mayor, if I may, as I understand it, you're not going to vote on 23 tonight, right?
Right, but I want to go ahead and get the readings done.
You only have one reading because it's a resolution, and you would do that at the recess meeting.
Well, I'll move forward with item number 24 as well.
Right.
You're coming right next, Director Hendricks. Madam Clerk? 24.
An ordinance to provide for and to adopt the 2020 budget for the City of Little Rock, Arkansas for the period beginning January 1st, 2020 and ending December 31st, 2020, to appropriate resources and uses for every expenditure item and fund, to declare an emergency and for the purposes first reading.
Is there a motion? There's a motion taken. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Madam. Roll call. And And again, this is not voting on, this is moving from the first reading.
Director Hendricks? Director Richardson?
Aye.
Director Webb? Director Peck? Director Hines? Director Wright? Director Compuris? Director Fortson? Director Adcock? Vice Mayor Wyrick? Director Hendricks, would you like to change your vote? You'd like to change it? Okay. Four, and 2 absent.
I vote aye.
You're not allowed to vote. The mayor can only vote to break a tie. And even if you voted, it wouldn't be passed because it would take 6 votes. And I apologize, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's six, yeah. Yeah.
We'll keep going. Director Hendricks.
I wanted to, as a minority, I would be remiss if I did not have a comment with regard to what Director Richardson had just talked about as far as minorities. And Mayor, I'm requesting of you that we need to do something. And I would like for us to begin with the Chief of Police with this discussion. I know there's only 3 blacks up here, and you know I'm a person that talks about race, and I talk about it openly. And I am just disappointed that we can sit here and talk about other things for 30, 40, 50 minutes. 30 at least. If not at one meeting, then it's at another meeting. So I'm just requesting of you, Mayor, that you pull together a committee where we can address the minority deaths in this community. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Tim Daters, sorry about that. That was brought to our attention. It was over there.
Thank you, Mayor Scott, directors. My name is Tim Daters. I live downtown at 303rd. Thank you for allowing me to address you tonight, and I'll be brief. I too disagree with the transfer of $2 million from our street funds, our turnback funds, to our general funds to help pay for the transit. We do need to provide good transit. It's the heart or the backbone of what we do in downtown in our city. But I do think that we've managed up until 2019 to fund Rock Region Metro out of our general revenues. In 2019, we allocated $1 million initially. Then we added another $500,000 to make it $1.5 million. And now in 2020, we're at $2 million. And when you say it's $2 million, yes, but what's happening is we're taking money out of our state turnback funds. Admittedly, we can use them for mass transit. That's an allowable use. But we're plugging a hole in our budget, in our general fund budget, with this transfer. And I think that if you look at the items that we've got in the general fund, yes, we need to address those. We're taking $2 million out of the money that Public Works has to spend on street projects, but we're not reducing any employees. So that means we're going to have a decline in services and the projects that we accomplish. I've worked on projects and streets and developments in this city since 1940, or for 40 years. I've worked from Fush Dam Pike to Chenal Parkway, from Highway 10 and Rebsamen down to Baseline Road and Point South. I've worked with, I've added it up, about 8 or 9 directors of Public Works, countless people in Public Works. They're great employees. They've got the city's best interests at heart. But I've also worked with a lot of people who live here, residents, businessmen, ministers, school administrators, developers, yes. And over those past 40 years, when they've had an issue that's been related to streets or drainage or something along Public Works, when the city says, yes, it's our problem. Yes, we understand it's a problem. Yes, we understand it's impacting you. You can't expand your parking lot at the church. You can't expand the parking lot at a school. Yes, your house continues to flood. And these are in all the neighborhoods of the city. over the past 40 years, the response has typically been, yes, you've got a problem. Yes, it's ours to fix, but we don't have the funds. And I agree, Director Christians. We probably say that to a lot of our problems. We don't have the funds. But I think we need to just look at it heads up and not start a transfer process to plug a budget gap in our general fund. We don't have a Friends of the Streets like we got a Friends of the Zoos. So you're not going to see a groundswell of opposition, whatever. And I'll support whatever the board does. I'm great the time that you guys put in and whatever decisions you make, I'll support them. But I just think we're being a little bit short-sighted in filling this temporary budget gap with transferring the monies. Our company did a study on Bowman Road in 1985 for the city of Little Rock to identify, what sections of Bowman Road could be built on the present alignment and what sections the city should step in and build it on a new alignment. And in 1985, to build Bowman Road from David O. Dodd up to Markham, the estimated cost was $3 million. That's about 2 miles of road was $3 million. That cost today, we've gotten a bit of it built, but that cost today is probably $20 million. And if you look at this $2 million that we're transferring out over the next 10 years, we could build Bowman from Colonel Glenn all the way up to Canis to minor arterial standards. And again, admittedly, it's just a street in the city, but it's a commitment. The citizens expect us to do things like that. And again, I just ask for your kids' consideration in your deliberations. I know you guys will do the right thing. Thank you again for your all the work and effort that you put in. And again, I really appreciate your consideration. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. John Hugler.
Mayor Scott, Vice Mayor Wyrick, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm here to ask you to vote no on the glass recycle. That's not much money, $3.39, but a lot of people don't have it. You don't get that Social Security bump every year. You've already gone up on the regular garbage pickup. You've gone up on recycle. Now you're going to fine people if their cans get dirty. We're going to lead to people dumping trash where it ought not be dumped. People are going to start saying, well, I'll just dump it down the street and I don't have to worry about it. Southwest Little Rock is pretty trashy now. If we continue on with this, it's going to get trashier. You look at Baseline Road from all the fast food joints, I see them every day. We pick up our ditch 2 or 3 times a week. And what do we get? We get from McDonald's. We get from, all the fast food joints. Out the window it goes. Out the window it goes. But we keep going up and up and up on the trash fees. We need to start enforcing the dumping. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hugler. Director Hendricks.
Thank you. I really wanted to ask, what can we do, and this is something that I've talked about for a long time, where landlords put the trash, or maybe a whole house of furniture on the curb, and I would really like for somebody to go in the 2600 block of Broadway. You could just see something needs to be done. We need to come back. Why aren't they taking this stuff to the city dump? It's because we have allowed people to dump trash. And south of 630, this is where I see it every day in Ward 1. So we're talking about making money. We need to make money. We're sitting here being remiss, and I know that whoever owns that property, the landlord should be charged.
Yes, ma'am. We'll get our code enforcement and check it out.
No, I want to know if we can start working on an ordinance. I think Tom knows I've been talking about this for 12 years. That's money that we could make. What's wrong? Is it that we don't want the landlord to pay?
Tom and I will visit with. We'll look into that and figure that out. Try to get you a response.
Basically drafted. You approved part of it. I think 3 meetings ago. Hopefully, probably the first meeting in December, we'll get the second part there. And the only reason it's not there yet is because we have 5 articles within the solid waste thing, and we're trying to get it streamlined so the definitions are in one place and the procedures are in one place, and then everything else is there. And it includes provisions in there that are going to redefine yard waste so that we can stop the trees, and it's going to redefine the ability to dump this stuff on the sidewalk.
Well, Tom, I'm talking about furniture, refrigerators, toilet seats. Yeah. Please, make it quick. Because
Yes, ma'am. We'll try to expedite it.
I'm being redundant. We talk about money. Well, let's make some money off of these, I call them devils.
Yes, ma'am. Director Wright?
2 things, Mayor. I think I heard one of the speakers say something about we hadn't reduced employees, and I know we did do that. And to cover $2 million shortfall for Rock Region, that would be quite a few staff. So I don't even know if that's plausible for something for us to have considered. And Ward 6 has a lot of substandard streets, and Bowman is in Ward 6, but I don't know if folks want to wait 20 years to get it done at $2 million a year. So we're going to have to come up with a way to do that. But we do need our transportation services, and this is an allowable expense. So just wanted to make sure that I address that piece. Also, too, I had proposed a few years back a foreclosure registry as a way of funding one of our departments, which was our Housing and Neighborhood Programs Department. And I have not gotten any feedback at all on that. And as I understood it, the ordinance or resolution had been written. We'd already gotten a RFQ out, got the company qualifications, and everything just stalled. So I would appreciate it if you would check on that to see if that's viable to move it forward.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Richardson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Director Hendricks, I wouldn't call them devils. I would call them misery merchants. I think that we have a disproportionate number of renter-occupied homes in your ward and my ward. And I think one of the things we can and should be looking at, figuring out ways, Tom, where we have homes that are declared vacant and unsafe right now that are boarded up. And if we don't do anything with those homes, 2 years from now, they're going to come up here before us for demolition. And I think the part with having a disproportionate number of renter-occupied homes, you have transfer folks in and out from time to time. Whenever they leave, they just dump their stuff on the street. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that they would need to figure out a way, some kind of way, to add to that ordinance to penalize, or if not, get these out-of-state landlords, owners into environmental court so there can be some fines levied on them, because I think that leads to part of why some of our communities look the way they look. I don't know if there's anyone in this room has ever gotten an oil change on a rental car. You don't do it because you don't own it. So we have a disproportionate number of boarded up, vacant, and unsafe homes right now without us having any proactive, creative ways to push for and encourage redevelopment and home ownership. Then we're going to still be faced with some of these criminal activities that I keep talking about. So, Tom, I encourage you to continue your work on that so we can get that in place and get those folks in the environmental court. I think Judge Lever would be supportive of us doing that and supportive of us trying to make sure Director Hendricks, not just from a income standpoint, but just from an environmental standpoint, and the safety and conditions of neighborhoods where people can help raise healthy children, youth, and families. And I think that's critical for our city if we want to grow and improve the quality of life for our whole city.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. Director Adcock?
Yes, it sounded like last week that without passing this glass recycling, that we would not have glass recycling in this city. But you can sign up for $10 a month and have it picked up right now. We also, I understand, have 20 or so places you can go and have like your glass. You leave your glass and they take it to the recycling. So I've heard from lots of people, and the majority of them say that they do not want to pay an additional $3.39 because if they have a bottle or two, they would take it by one of the stores or one of the places. But then for people who have lots of recycling of glass, there's a service already available for them. So I will not be supporting this because I think there's too many people in our city who just do not have the amount of glass that they want to pay this amount each month to have it picked up. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And again, I want to make sure everyone's aware of that particular vote. I thought that needed 2 or 3 readings. That particular vote is not going to be until, because it's only needs to be read one time. So item 23 will be voted on the 26th, as well as item 24. Director Hines.
Thank you. Mayor, a few more budget. Are we done with the public cards on the budget? Do you have any more?
No.
Okay. We got a few other budget questions. Is our police chief here by chance? Is Chief Humphreys out there?
He
I
is.
saw him earlier.
He was.
Evening, Chief. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. How about you?
Doing well. With the budget, and we when we went through our previous budget cuts earlier this year, police and fire, we didn't look at them. But I had some questions just from a budgeting standpoint, because I think y'all's budget's increasing by about $2 million this year, correct?
I believe so. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
On the discussion we had earlier this year here, I asked you a question about were we still working 12-hour shifts, and I thought you said no, but
No, sir. We are.
Okay.
But we are in the planning process to go to an alternate shift, hopefully 10-hour. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We are currently still working 12-hour shifts. We are currently working on a program to hopefully go to the 10-hour shifts sometime in the spring.
Okay, super. I know that as I talked to some of the patrol division guys that and of course this 12-hour shift predated you coming on board, but when Chief Buckner did it, it was supposed to be a temporary fix, and it's kind of lingered probably a little longer. And 2 concerns, and we've even seen it in the fire department, that when we're low on staff, lots of overtime, injuries, especially in fire, injuries go up. I'm sure you've probably seen injury rates go up a little bit with the patrol division, but what I hear from our rank and file patrol guys is that 8 hour, they could probably stretch to 10 hours and still be on their toe, be crisp. But after 10 hours, I think the chances of an adverse interaction with the general public goes up as their time on the beat that day has gone up. And so that and just the health and safety of our officers. The other issue, I know that one of your big drivers is overtime, and tell me if my numbers are right, but our patrol division only accounts for about 30% of our overtime. Is that correct?
I would feel safe to say that, yes.
Okay. And we've got roughly 210 officers roughly on patrol?
212 as we speak.
212, okay.
Yes,
All
sir.
right. Is that our fully, I know we're not quite fully staffed, is that our full force on patrol?
On patrol, it is not. It's funny you mention this. We just finished a 3.5-hour meeting today to talk about our future work schedule, trying to come up with an alternate schedule. Hopefully, we believe that we can go back to a 10-hour shift. We're looking at different beat modifications. We're looking at a new geographical accountability model. And so we believe that in order for this to work, we're going to need between 225 to 235 in patrol. Now, keep in mind, we still have 25 recruits in the academy, so I'm not including those individuals. And I have made a promise to our operations bureau commander that they will get at least, hopefully, 20 of those in patrol.
All right, super. The other concern is that I know that the big driver in overtime is our detectives and homicide, major crimes, those guys. We've had some occurrences that predate you in the past where we've had some officers abuse that overtime privilege. What checks and balances do you guys have in place to, look at that?
I'm sorry, all overtime has to be approved. So an officer just can't automatically say that they're going to be on overtime. We have leaned on our supervisors, especially our first line supervisors, our sergeants and our lieutenants, to monitor, to make sure that it is just the overtime that they're working is required. If we can put something off until the next, until the next shift comes in, like a report call that might put somebody in overtime, we try to do that. But our biggest thing is our communications division, which we have had a difficult time being fully staffed. I think we're on the road to that. That's been a major hit to our overtime budget. Also, like you mentioned earlier, our detectives, anytime we have a major incident, that continues to roll. That time continues to roll.
I know
they
in
have to
homicide,
respond.
it happens when it happens, and those guys are on call.
Yes, sir. And we have to have a minimum number of officers working the street at any given time. And so that time, and though we sometimes have to backfill with a little bit of overtime on that.
Right.
So it's being managed. It's not a free for all.
Good. The other question, and it's funny you talk about geography, is this the conversation you and I've had, is that are you guys looking at, I think ideally I would love to have a fourth patrol division, but when you add that, you add layers of command, and it doesn't seem probably to make sense to do that. But have you guys looked at realigning the geography of your patrol divisions to kind of shrink northwest a little bit? Because what I'm driving at, and you and I have had the conversation, is when we talk about police protection, and the myth out there is that West Little Rock has the premier police, and I can remember Chief Thomas sitting up there when we were in public hearings, people saying, we just want the same police protection they got out in West Little Rock, and Chief Thomas says, no, you don't. And I can tell you from personal experience that you don't want it, because the response times in West Little Rock are 2 to 3 times what they are in the rest of the city. And my constituents, all they want is the same kind of police protection the rest of the city gets.
Yes, sir.
And so I know that part of it, we're part of Northwest Patrol, which is now, if it was a city unto its own, it'd be the 3rd largest city in the state.
Correct. That's correct. And it goes back to, man, you must be osmosis here, because we've been thinking. I know, right? We just had that meeting today.
Well, that's good news. That's good news.
We
That's
just
what I
had
was
that
wanting to
meeting
hear.
today because we've got a new CAD system coming on board in June. And then this is the opportunity for us to look at our districting to see where we can make any tweaks or whatever, to see if we need to reduce the size of some, move some. So we're all into to prepping for that. And another thing, the fire chief and I have had discussions regarding if there's ever a need to open a 4th station. We were talking about maybe a public safety center, combination fire and police. So which would save a lot of money, but it'd be dual purpose for the citizens out there.
Chief, I appreciate it. Those were just kind of the hot button issues I had.
Yes, sir.
Where you guys were concerned. So that's all I had on that issue.
Okay.
Any more questions, Director Hines?
I do, but not for the chief. If anybody else wants to ask the chief some questions, I'll yield.
I do.
Director Richardson?
Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong. A couple of years ago, before Chief got here, when we had a serious uptick in violent crime, didn't we have mandated overtime for certain personnel? Was that not mandated?
That's correct.
So the chief didn't have any option in that. There was mandated overtime for certain personnel due to a serious uptick in criminal activity, particularly homicides.
Correct.
And Chief, you and I have talked about this as well. I don't know if this is a training issue, how we can address this, but I think that there's a perception in the community that the police have a protect and serve philosophy in certain parts of our city and a patrol and control in other parts of our city. And that may speak to Lance's point about increasing the number of police officers in West Little Rock. But how can we address that? I know there's no way you can direct a curriculum that can train sympathy and empathy. And I think that there's a perception in our community, a very real perception, that the police officers protect and serve in certain parts and they patrol and control in other parts. And the places where we need the heaviest police presence, in my opinion, happen to be the places where we have the worst community police relationships. And you and I have talked about this before. How can we address that, sir?
I think we're doing it right now. I think you bringing that to my attention and the the director's holding me accountable, us providing transparency in the curriculum. One of the things you and I have talked about is that we have introduced emotional intelligence into our training. With the 21st Century Policing Initiative, one of the pillars talks about officer wellness, and that being not the physical part, but the emotional part. And so we've introduced emotional intelligence in our training. We, as police officers, need to know where our emotional level is before we can address anyone else's problems. And so we are actually providing that in the academy. As the chief, it's incumbent upon me to continue to spread this information to the rank and file, the concerns of the community. And I think what you'll see with this geographical accountability, you and I have talked about having, and I think I've talked to Director Wright about this also, and the mayor and several other directors regarding geographical accountability, where we will have a direct link to an area. So if you have a problem, you don't have to call Chief Humphrey. You can actually call that lieutenant, who will then call the sergeant, who will then call the officer who is responsible for knowing what's going on in that area. So it's a 24/7, 365. And we're looking at a concept that's going to put more officers in our community-oriented policing model. So those are things that we're looking at. We're hoping to, it's amazing that this topic came up because we just had a 3.5-hour meeting today about how to improve the relationship and keep it going, not to where it just looks way we're actually eating, breathing, community-oriented policing.
Well, I know it filters from top down, and I want to commend you on your leadership and the work that you've been doing, particularly around improving community police relationships. And I think that I've seen you in the community and hadn't been perfunctory or symbolic. You've actually gone out and reached out to the community. And I think a couple of weeks ago you were unfairly criticized by one of our constituents in the community about adjourning a meeting that you had no control over. And I want to commend you because I think I called you on a Saturday night and they requested to meet with you a couple of days later, and you committed to it and you showed up, and I think that meant a lot to them and the people in the community. So I want to thank you for your leadership and your hard work, particularly around improving community police relationships. So thank you, sir.
We're going to continue to do that.
Director Kapiris.
Well, this will be a short statement for a difficult question that I don't think you can answer today. And if you can, I'd be surprised. I have spent the weekend looking at these numbers, and as I told you this afternoon, a long time. And I can tell you, Sarah, I've got more numbers than I've ever had that I unfortunately don't understand very well. And I know that Ken and Irma think that a number of us don't care about what's going on crime-wise in the city, but that is not true. And having been there with Les Hollingsworth when we started the PIT money and seeing what's going on and having acknowledged this year on multiple occasions that we have not been good stewards of that money in any way. And then having listened to the mayor's, whatever those things you do each week, the PR things, where you talk about what's happening in the week. I don't do, but y'all send it to me, so I do listen to them. I am really concerned about what we're doing with PIT, and here's the dilemma. We have gone through a school board or a school reckoning crisis where we are going to move ahead with local control. We have said as a board in general terms that we want to help with that process. I learned when I looked this weekend, or this today at your tape, that we're hiring an education czar, I think is what we call it. I called the head of the youth and family group, and they've not passed a budget for this year or recommendations, correctly? Is that right, Dorothy? You've passed the budget, but you hadn't got any recommendations in it on what to do with it. And Ken talks about very eloquently that we need to be directing the money to hotspots in our community. So, and then last year we made a commitment to a reading program in the summer for kids, which we need to do. And I am unclear where this money's going. Are we helping the school district? Are we partnering with the school district? Are we helping the chief? Are we going to hotspots in the city? We don't have recommendations yet from the group that gives us recommendations. We're hiring someone that I don't know where the money's coming from and how we're doing it. And I need those questions answered before I can vote on this budget, because we need to help the chief. We need to help the school district. We need to help take care of the violent crimes that's going on. And when I look at this budget, there's money there, but I don't know where the money's going. And, you know, our job, I see it, is that we're the ones that are supposed to say, here's where the money's supposed to be going, and how are we going to do it? So are we going to go to helping you find the hot spots and do things there? Are we partnering with the school district? If we are, how are we partnering with it? How much money we're putting into it? Where's it coming from? If we're hiring someone in the city to be in charge of that, what do we need your group for if we're hiring somebody else? And those are big issues that when I look at the budget, all I see is numbers. I don't see any how we're spending the money. So it's very much like the roads. We've got money in there, but when we did the tax, we went back and said, this third is going to go to this, and this project. And what we've put in there is a lump sum of money without, to me, any way of looking. And I spent the weekend looking, and I spent this afternoon looking when I got through. And I'm concerned about what I read in the paper, and I wouldn't take your job if you gave it to me and doubled the salary. But it is, I need, before I'm going to vote on this budget, clarity on where the money's going, who we're partnering with, who's paying for all these things, and how we're doing it, and how.
And Mr. Computers, I can answer all of that. And I hate to share this with you, Director Computers. Number one, the city, the community programs director has provided the recommendations to the budget, and that's the budget that you have. So I don't know where you got that information from. So that's number one. Number two, this board agreed that we would target dollars as it relates to the community schools model. This board agreed to that, as well as understanding that this board, that we would hire, not an education czar, a chief education officer that would focus on the community schools model, that would come out of a combination of foundation dollars as well as city dollars. That has already been communicated to this board, and you are very well aware of that. So I'm kind of confused as to these type of questions, because we've already had this conversation, and this budget has been before the community for the last month and a half to have that type of question when we've already had that communication.
Well,
and I'm not finished. As we continue to talk about the prevention and intervention treatment dollars, those dollars are the same monies that we've discussed for the last month and a half. That's $4.75 million. And on top of that, as you know, the prevention and intervention treatment dollars, it's a grant funded, it's a grant administrative funded, so we have dollar amounts for particular programs, and only until if and when we submit our RFQ process, then when those organizations then submit that, then we pay on a monthly basis based on what they do in going forward. So nothing has changed from last year to this year, so I'm just kind of quite confused by those questions.
Well, then I'm just a dumbo then, because I don't know the answers to those questions. And I talked to Kathy Webb as she was driving to San Antonio, and to my knowledge, they've not passed a budget yet.
Well,
not pass their recommendation.
this board passes the budget.
And will they,
And that community, what you're referring to is, if what I think you understand, is the CYF Commission. The CYF Commission has reviewed the budget. Am I correct?
they've reviewed the budget, but they've not made recommendations.
Because this administration makes the recommendation to the budget. They have reviewed it, and I believe they made recommendations too. Am I correct? If I'm not, you can say I'm. Exactly. You can't make those recommendations. That's why I was.
But my whole point is, we're appropriating money to go to the schools.
No, again, Director Computers. Director Computers, as I shared before, as you voted on several of these budgets before, they can't make recommendations on the funding based on the RFQ process until we pass a budget. That's the same thing that's been going for the last several years. As it relates to the community school model, which was shared with you before, we've targeted $500,000. That's nothing new. We've talked about that. That will help with the community schools model with the wraparound services. So I'm trying to figure out, what else are you asking?
Again, then I may be a dumbo, but I didn't understand that we voted on that. We talked about it, but we've never voted on it, to my knowledge.
No, you're right.
And we've never voted on taking money to hire someone to be in charge of this program.
That's what you have this budget for. That's what was discussed with you.
Then I would like, before next week, an itemized amount that's going to each one of those things and where the funds are coming from.
We've already shared that. It's in the budget.
Well, again, if you would.
It's in the budget. We've already discussed. It's $500,000 that goes towards community schools model.
Sarah, would you mind telling me where that is in the budget?
It's embedded in the prevention, intervention, treatment dollars.
Well, but that's my whole point, Frank. I've looked at it, but I don't find it individualized in there. That's what I want to know.
And again, Director Computers, you will get an itemized number. It's just kind of confusing that you've had this budget for a month and a half, but it's okay. We'll get you an itemized number.
That's all I want to know. And
all right.
That's where I can vote on this budget.
Thank you so much. Chief Humphrey. Sorry about that, Director Andrews.
It's going to be short. I wanted to thank the chief because I think Mr. Moore may be familiar also with what's happening down on below East Roosevelt Road, West Roosevelt Road, and I just wanted to thank you publicly for taking care of that issue that's going on down there with the residents, where these large trucks are coming in and they're parking overnight, and they're just causing confusion. I want to thank you for responding.
You're more than welcome, ma'am.
Director Richardson.
Yes, Mayor. And I think I mentioned this to you right before the press conference, talking about local control. Chief, this is not for you of the school district, and I would caution us about targeting PIT funds, because I think that initial amount that was passed in Future Little Rock was $3 million for PIT. And I think that was done based on the fact that previous sales tax were couched as law enforcement only. So at that time, we said $1 for dollar. For every dollar for a new police officer, we'd spend $1 for PIT. And that $3 million amount, Dean, was based on 45 new police officers a year over a 3-year period. That's what it would have cost the city at that time. So that's how we got that $3 million. In 2008, 2009, during the recession, we cut that by $500,000. So we went from $3 million to $2.5 million, and that $500,000 has not been put back in it. So Vision Little Rock, you put another $3 million. So for the last couple of years, we've been operating on $5.5 million for prevention, intervention, and treatment. And I would suggest too that we figure out a way to change the name of that source of funding, like we changed the name from the Little Rock Task Force for the Prevention of Youth Violence to the Children, Youth, and Families Commission, because we're not doing treatment anymore. Back then, when that was passed, Dean, we were doing pre and post treatment. We were doing treatment for young people who attended Little Rock School District in partnership with Arkansas Children's Hospital, and we're not doing treatment anymore. So I think we need to figure out a way to change the name of that source of funding, because it's not prevention, intervention, and treatment. We're not doing any treatment anymore. Back in '93 when that passed, shortly after that, Dean, we funded pre- and post-treatment adult programs. We funded treatment programs for young people who attend the Little Rock School District provided by Arkansas Children's Hospital. And I would caution us with respect to targeting that source of funding. And Mayor, I think you've done a wonderful job. I think you made some intended changes. I think you made some unintended changes. You've changed how we deal with policy now. We've been dealing with policy a certain way for 30 plus years. That's changed. You've changed how we selected vice mayor. We've been doing that some 20 plus years. So I think that you've done a wonderful job. What I would caution you on is us looking at that source of funding to help address this local control with the school district. I think that they need to have the funding to get us involved or help deal with that issue. And I would also, I think I mentioned it to you, I wouldn't necessarily recommend or be supportive of an election for a new school board. I would suggest that if they're willing, that the previous school board get back on board and serve, because I don't think they were doing anything that was nefarious or wrong. I think that they were unfairly minimized, because at the time the state's justification for taking over Little Rock School District was we had 6 schools out of 48 that were underperforming. That's 87.5% success rate. And when I went to school, that was B+. I mean, 6 out of 48 was a justification. And if I play in the Super Bowl, man, I complete 42 out of 48 passes, I'm the MVP. If I make 42 out of 48 free throws consistently, 87.5, I'm a great free throw shooter. So I would really caution us with respect to how we get involved and how we deal with the school district issue, because that could be a real hot topic for us to deal with. And I want to once again thank you for the things that you campaigned on and you've followed through with, and you've helped us move forward. And I think there's some things that your election has provided some unintended consequences. One in particular, how we deal with policy issues now, and 2, how we select vice mayor. So just thank you, and just a word of caution that we look at that source of funding real carefully, because those sales tax were passed based on those PIT dollars, and Lance will find another name for it, but those dollars was couched as ways we can put funding to nonprofit, small community-based organizations to help address the criminal activity that the chief and his force have to deal with. So I think for us to deviate from that, I think it may be detrimental to how we couched and sold that sales tax. So I would really caution how we look at that.
Yes, sir. Director Fortson?
Thank you, Mayor. I seem to share some of Director Campuris' amnesia, I suppose. I have heard the discussion about the activities we would be conducting in the relationship to the school situation, and I commend you for your pulpit of leadership. And I think, given the legal constraints, that's about the best thing we can do, is be public. But after hearing the discussion and reading in the newspaper about a full-time education commissioner and some of the programs, I started looking through the areas, and I was going to ask the same question that Director Campuris just asked, asked Sarah to take me back through there and show me in the new positions. I could not find the director of education listed as an addition anywhere, and maybe I'm obviously overlooked it, nor could I find any identification of where the funds were coming from. And I'd like to have clarification on both of those if I could have.
Yes, sir. And again, as everyone is aware, when we made that announcement after I had a strong communication with each board member, if you go back in the news clips, all of that was shared. So I know that's been quite some time, but if you go back to the papers, you guys will remember that that was all there. And again, it's embed. What you'll see is a allotted amount of $500,000 that we plan to target. Again, nothing can happen until this board passes the budget, and that's how you have those recommendations. That's how the CYF funding amount has always been portrayed. You've never had in CYF those type of details. But we can change to have those details this year, but you've never had that before. Just want to make sure we're all clear.
In the past, as my memory serves me, generally when new positions at a cabinet level are being added, there is funding at this level or an explanation of where the funding would come from, and not just as a generality within a budget, but with more specificity. And I think maybe that's what's missing, and that's what I was asking about. In addition, I know there are some very worthwhile suggestions for programs to cooperate in the educational process, but I would like to see, before we have a final decision, some specific items about how that money will be used and from where it's going to come, and what the negative effect might be on some other program, as Director Richardson mentioned. And maybe I wasn't listening the way I should have when you talked about. I heard you talk a lot about.
I never go out in public without saying something. I'm talking to you guys, so that's why I'm kind of a bit perplexed. And again, I understand it's been 2 months since you all agreed to that, but again, just so we're all clear. The target amount is about $500,000. What you'll see is, because this board, as we've talked before, is that the majority of those dollars would go towards the services, the wraparound services. So it's not, this education person would not receive a large amount of money from that standpoint, from a salary standpoint, because there are going to be foundation dollars that are going to supplant that money. So most of that's going to come from the private sector on that particular education person. It's not going to be all city dollars. From that standpoint. And so until that is situated, all you will see is the wraparound services for $500,000. But again, if not half, or 75% of those dollars will come from a foundation. So most of that $500,000 will be services to those students. And so it's not as easy to give you that type of, we can fix up a number, but that would be disingenuous and not honest. But I just want to make sure that you know that that $500,000 that we have targeted. Again, target means you put it into the budget and you all pass or not pass. So from that standpoint. But again, we have done nothing different that you've done as each member of this board with the PIT. There's a budget. You understand the number of employees. I think the number of employees, the FTEs that are with there, and they administer those grants. And based on the services that are rendered with those nonprofit organizations, we then pay afterwards. So what you're asking for is it's never been done before. So.
Well, maybe our difference is on a question of timing, but if you draw the parallel with PIT, then am I to understand that this $500,000, as you begin to allocate so much to a specific program, those will be itemized and brought back to this board as individual PIT programs are?
We can. I mean, that's how we have a budget. You could always come back and ask what we spend. We always tell you what we spend, and we itemize it out based off those.
Past years, like PIT, though, there's generally a lengthy presentation and vote and approval of X dollars for this program, X dollars for this program, and we go through that as part of a presentation rather than just take a lump PIT sum.
And Director Forston, again, this board asked us not to do that this year. We could have done that. This board asked us not to do that. So I'm just, because matter of fact, the workshop, basically, this board asked us not to do workshop this year. Thank you.
One more statement, that we did not have the workshop, but again, in the past, this decision I'm telling you about, once we voted for a PIT budget, then some period of time into the new fiscal year is when a listing of projects and a vote and an allocation would come out. Am I not right, Mr. City Manager?
Sure. What has historically happened is when we're into this part of the budget, there's a number. Director Richardson is right about how the numbers have changed. After the sales tax passed, it was $5.5 million. And typically during the budget process that we're in now, that's what is adopted. That number is adopted. When the board made the adjustments in June, that number was decreased with the understanding that we would not use any of the carryover money as we've done in the past. And so typically there's almost between $1 million and $1.5 million in carryover in our PIT allocation. So what we have done in some cases in the past is used that to balance some other things. But part of the agreement that this board talked about was that with the reduction, we would no longer utilize any of the carryover money. All the carryover money would stay into the prevention and intervention and treatment efforts. And Director Richards, one thing I shared your same concerns when we were going through the master plan with the consultants. I said we no longer do treatment. I remember we used to fund 20 beds for women and children over there by UMS and ULR. And so I said we don't do treatment. And their response, and Dana would remember this, is they said, your prevention and intervention efforts really are treating the social ills of, and again, these were the experts that we employed. But so we did have a lot of that discussion. But yeah, typically the board would vote on just the overall number, and then, in fact, in December, hopefully in our first meeting in December, Tom's going to have the resolution to extend for one more year our current providers as we make some adjustments with some of the PIT concepts. But that's typically what happens. The board votes, has that overall number, and then we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Director Adcock?
Yes. The chief, please. Chief, the last chief of police got where every time I just about start walking up to him, he'd start shaking his head no, because he knew what the question was going to be. So I think probably even after this short time, you know what my question is going to be. In your meeting today, did anything come out about when we will be getting more COP officers?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Can you share with us when that's going to be?
Part of the plan is, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing an operational reorg, and so that consists of, as we talked about, the beats, looking at do we need to realign the beats, response times, and absorbing some of our specialized units into a more centralized COP. We want to call them community resource officers, and we're looking at taking those positions in from those specialized unit, one specialized unit in particular, and adding those officers to our COPP, what's known as COP now, community-oriented policing, and adding that to that unit, and and our plan is to increase the community proactiveness of our department. So yes, part of the talks today did include increasing the number of COP officers.
So about how long before we can see them on the streets?
I am very comfortable in saying June the 1st.
That's a long time. I agree with Director Richardson about the crime, because in the area he's talking about, the area he represents, is also the area I live in. And I think if we could get those COP officers back in those neighborhoods, lots of this relationship stuff that's going on with these young people could stop. And the longer we put that off, we're going to have more and more of this that perhaps they could have some control over. So please, June is a long time away. If you could move that up even to March, that would be, I think, a big benefit to our crime problem.
Well, if I may, I totally understand, and duly noted, you and I have spoken before, so duly noted, I understand your concerns. However, we want to wait until, we'll continue to have the same program that we have now, whatever resources that are needed. We have great COP officers, and so they do a lot. We ask a lot of them, so that's why we want to increase the staffing in those areas. So we have an academy class graduating the end of January. We're hoping, the reason we want to start June the 1st, number one, is that's when our new CAD system comes into place, and so that's part of the process. The other is that these recruits will be completely finished with field training, and then also there's some other things we want to work out, because I'm a firm believer that I want to go all or none. And so we want to make sure when we start this, we're going to be able to sustain it, and we're going to be able to get results. And so one of the things is reallocating staffs so that we can put more officers in COP. As a matter of fact, one of the things that you will see is there will be a delegated COP sergeant. that will be supervising the units now.
I feel like I'm selfish in asking, but Southwest Little Rock only has 3.
Yes, ma'am.
And to cover the whole area from Alexander Road all the way over and then all the way back out, it's just impossible for 3 officers. We have about 30 or 40 mobile home parks.
Yes, ma'am.
And we need those officers in those mobile home parks very bad.
Duly noted.
And 3 people just can't do it.
And I can promise you we'll increase that number.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I have 2 other things that are not concerning the budget. So when you get all the budget over with, I've got 2 items.
Yes, ma'am. I'll notate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Hines?
One quick thing, Mayor, I just got a text. I think you've got a yellow citizen communication card that actually should have been a white card on the budget. Marty Ganaka, maybe?
Yes, citizen communication card.
Marty, do you?
Yeah. Well, we can still come back to you on citizen communication. It's still part of the.
All right. So just some clarity, wasn't part of my, just some came up. So Mayor and Bruce, so of the 4.75 million for PI, for children, youth and families this year, that 500,000 for the community schools would come out of that 4.75 million?
That's the target, yes.
All right. And Mayor, I'll share with you that in our conversation about the overall vision for the community schools, and I agree with you that I think the CYF money could be put to good use, because I think those schools are going to end up in our high intensity areas where we're having problems overall. But this is the first time I've heard of the actual target number. So that was kind of what. And if you'll recall, when we launched the initial budget discussion, I had some questions, but none of our department heads were here. So I had asked that we could have another budget discussion with our department heads, and I thought we would have done that at a previous agenda meeting, but tonight's been the first opportunity that we've had a budget discussion with our department heads here. So clarity on what I was thinking. The last bit of questions I've got are for you about your staffing, because I'm getting questions that I don't know how to answer, and
Sure.
I just wanted to. So you allocated 150,000 in additional funds for city branding. So I just wanted to get your take on kind of what's the vision for that funding.
Sure. I think this, matter of fact, Bruce, how about you handle just the history of that branding column first before I kind of share that statement?
I think it was 2017 and maybe 2018. I think Mayor Stola, we wanted to do something to focus on increasing our the pool of applicants for the police department. So that was the initial. I think that might have been $100,000 that first year, and that's proven very successful. And then when we ran into more budget issues, I think in 19 that we didn't fund it, but that I think originally showed up in 2017.
Okay.
Thank you. And so to answer that question, Director Hines, this branding initiative is something I think anyone in the city of Little Rock would share and agree that our city's had a branding issue for quite some time. And so that $150,000 will be doing a branding initiative for the entire city as we promote our city publicly, inwardly, and outwardly to the state and the nation to help increase a number of different efforts as it would pertain to our image of our city.
Okay, super.
And I'm sorry.
No, are we going to do that in-house, or are we going to seek an outside contractor to help?
That would be a bidding process that we would go through.
So, all right.
Competitive bidding.
Okay, super. And then I get questions because this has been kind of a little bit of a moving target after we removed the chief of staff at last year's budget. So as far as your staffing for your personal staff, so you have Charles Blake at chief of staff, Kendra Pruitt as your senior advisor, then you have administrative assistant, and is Scott Whitley on your staff now, moved out from Bruce's staff? So is that the 4 that you have on your staff?
Well, I'm the chief executive officer of the entire city. It's not a separate staff. We have an office of executive administration.
Okay. Is that role? Is that?
There's been no additions to staffing.
Okay, is that rolled up in with Bruce, or is that your personal? Is that all?
The Office of Executive Administration includes the Chief Executive Officer, the Chief Administrative Officer, and any other positions that were part of this Chief Administrative Office. It's all combined into one. It's the
Okay.
Office of Executive Administration.
I just get questions, and,
Sure.
and we've moved around with James Jones.
That position has
leaving,
been
rolled
canceled.
into to different positions. So the other question I get is, where is your security detail? Is it in the police budget, or is it in the Office of Executive?
It's in the same budget when you looked at it last time. It's in the police budget.
Okay, all right. I'm just want clarity, so because I want to make sure I'm.
And I'm making sure you have all the clarity. And just
then-
for the record, I just want to make sure you're aware. I don't know how you didn't realize it, but the department directors have been at every meeting and expected to be at every meeting. The last 4 meetings that we discussed the budget, and they've all been here. So just want to.
Well, the only budget discussion I recall having was
We had the
at the
budget.
initial budget launch, which they were not here that evening.
Yeah, not that one, but everyone after that they have been there. So the last 3 meetings.
All right, and then your outside marketing help with Miss Jackson that was not, but is that budgeted going forward for next year?
Yeah, Ms. Jackson is a part of our part-time budget.
Okay, all right. That's the only questions I have. Thank you.
Yeah. Director Hendricks.
Thank you. I know that everybody up here has a right to say what they want and what they please when they get ready, but I've been on this board for 12 years, and of every budget that we have ever had, I never saw so many questions. Some were appropriate, some were inappropriate. But the thing that I want to say is that we might as well get used to our mayor, who is young, gifted, and black, a former banker. And I think that we could, if we would, work with him. We have a right to ask questions, but, if I could just comment, but I won't do that, on a lot of questions that I've heard, that makes sense. So we need to really come together, do what is necessary. I think, and maybe not, that this audience was aware of the budget that was left for the new mayor to work with. We don't want to talk about that. That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions from the board on the budget? Seeing none, I'm going to take the opportunity to have a few comments. Again, we've been discussing this budget for the last month and a half, and I continue to ask for this board to ask questions on anything that you have, and to ask questions to Sarah Linehan, Mr. Moore, and myself. I continue to encourage that you ask questions, send us emails, or we can wait to have the questions here, but it helps expedite time and make sure everyone has everything answered as best as possible as we move forward. We've been discussing this for a month and a half, and we can continue to discuss to December 31st. That's our legal time to pass a budget. And so I want to make sure that you have every opportunity to continue to ask questions, and we, as always, have answered those questions. This budget is a balanced budget. I think we understand that the previous budget that before I came into office, we had to cut because it wasn't matching revenues with ongoing revenues and expenses, so we had to cut that. And so clearly, we want to ensure that we get an early start with this budget to have a balanced budget, which we have produced before you. If the board, it's my role as the mayor to propose a budget jointly with our chief administrative officer. We propose, along with our CFO, a balanced budget with ongoing revenues and ongoing expenses, and we are excited about it. And it's up to this board to dispose of the budget and to make some changes in this process. But the best way to do this is we want to make sure that you ask as many questions as possible. And I hope please continue to ask more questions between now and November the 26th. Director Adcock, I think you had a couple more questions, and after that we will go to item number 25.
Okay. We laid off several parks employees earlier, and I was made aware of today that we have had out on the street a new position for a deputy park director. And my question was, I don't think I've seen that any place that we was going to hire another parks director, a deputy parks director. Was any of the people that was laid off, was they offered this position?
Director Adcock, just to kind of, again, I want to make sure, remind everyone, when we reduced the budget back this past summer, which was 2019 budget passed in 2018, we reduced somewhere around 40 employees. Those all but 2 or 3 employees, and I think the 2 or 3 decided not to take jobs that were offered to them. All of those individuals were then shifted over to our Public Works Division, and so they all received jobs from that standpoint. And so, due to the job requirements, I don't believe, I'm pretty sure that those. Bruce, you want to finish on the second part?
Yeah, well, I was just going to mention that the position that's being advertised is a position that was not part of the layoffs.
But Bruce, I thought someone told me that an HR person that called me about this said that when you lay off people, then whenever a new job is created, they're usually offered that new job first.
Sure. You have 180 days, I think. So it's called, they basically have a first right of refusal.
Yes.
But you have to be qualified. It's not an automatic. So this position is over our recreation area, and we did have internal candidates to apply, and we're going through that process right now. But this wasn't a position that was reduced as a reduction in force. So that's where that comes in. If we bring back a position, then yes, those employees who are qualified do have sort of first right of refusal. But this is a position that was vacated, and now we're going through. And again, it's the director of recreation, which is an important component in John's area.
Okay. The other item, Mayor, is I read in the newspaper this afternoon after someone brought to my attention that we are advertising for people to apply to be on the Citizens Review Board. And do you have anything to give us tonight to talk about this, the criteria that we're looking for, or anything about this review board? Yes, I remember when we voted to do this, but we've never seen anything that says what this board and commission are going to really do, what we're looking for in applicants, because the people that call me is wanting to know, can I apply for this? So
yes, they can apply, and Director Adcock, you're correct. This board did pass that budget. The criteria is within the ordinance, and there are a set of application questions that are online right now, and I can, after this meeting, I'll show you where that is located, just in case someone calls you, and you can kind of help direct them there. And as I shared before, the Citizen Review Board has their first meeting. There also will be a community informational session, just to make the community aware, further aware of the Citizen Review Board.
Okay. Mr. Moore, can you or Ms. Langley or someone get for us the ordinance that created this so that we'll have that before us? I appreciate the mayor offering to show me where to find it and everything, but I'd rather have it before I leave this evening if possible. Thank you.
No, we got to do more. Oh, we got a few more. Yes, Director. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. All right, now we're going to move into a public hearing for item number 25. Madam Clerk, would you please read the ordinance for the first time?
An ordinance to authorize the issuance of industrial revenue bonds under the Municipalities and Counties Industrial Development Revenue Bond Law for the purpose of securing and developing industry, to authorize the sale of the bonds and the approval of the bond purchase agreement and a payment in lieu of taxes agreement in connection therewith, to authorize the execution and delivery of a trust indenture securing the bonds, to authorize and prescribe certain matters pertaining to the project, the acquisition, construction, and equipping thereof, and the financing thereof, to authorize the execution and delivery of a lease agreement relating to the project, to declare an emergency and for the purposes first reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place on second reading.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Second reading.
An ordinance to authorize the issuance of industrial development revenue bonds under the Municipalities and Counties Industrial Development Revenue Bond Law for the purpose of securing and developing industry, to authorize the sale of the bonds and the approval of a bond purchase agreement and a payment in lieu of taxes agreement in connection therewith, to authorize the execution and delivery of a trust indenture securing the bonds, to authorize and prescribe certain matters pertaining to the project, the acquisition, construction, and equipping thereof, and the financing thereof, to authorize the execution and delivery of a lease agreement relating to the project, to declare an emergency. Second reading.
To suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Is there a motion? There's a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Third reading.
An ordinance to authorize the issuance of industrial development revenue bonds in the Municipalities and Counties Industrial Development Revenue Bond Law for the purpose of securing and developing industry, to authorize the sale of the bonds and the approval of a bond purchase agreement and a payment in lieu of taxes agreement in connection therewith, to authorize the execution and delivery of a trust indenture securing the bonds, to authorize and prescribe certain matters pertaining to the project, the acquisition, construction, and equipping thereof, and the financing thereof, to authorize the execution and delivery of a lease agreement relating to the project. Declare an emergency. Third and final reading.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody to speak for? Well, yes, ma'am.
Could we have the applicant to come and talk to the citizens about what they were doing, because it's such a good
Yes, ma'am.
thing?
Yes, ma'am. Ben?
Good evening. I'm Stephen Baird with HMS. What would you like to ask?
I'd like you to tell everyone what you're going to be making out there.
Sure. So HMS is a leading global manufacturing solution driven houseware products. So we make products in the storage, organization, waste, and kitchen categories.
And how many employees are you going to have?
Over the next 2 years, we're looking to hire 90 employees.
Great.
And I definitely want to let you know how much we're appreciative of your 90 jobs, and to the Softy family as well. And we're really excited about it. And we do appreciate you. I think, Ben, you've done a great job, and we'll carry on forward. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you.
Seeing that there's no one to speak against, this public hearing is now closed. We now have had 3 readings of this ordinance. Are there any questions from the board? There are no questions from the board. All those in favor of passing this particular ordinance, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. We do no longer have a citizens communication.
Emergency clause.
Thank you so much. A motion for emergency clause? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it for the emergency clause. There's no citizens communication. There's a meeting to adjourn.
Recess.
Recess. Thank you so much. Motion to recess. Thank you so much. Recess to.